My name is David, and I've been a wildlife ranger here in Kenya's Maasai Mara for 15 years. 15 long years of watching nature's most incredible moments unfold before my eyes. I've seen lions hunt in perfect coordination, witnessed the great migration cross crocodile-infested rivers, and watched elephants mourn their dead with a tenderness that would break your heart. But what happened on that morning? Nothing in my 15 years of experience had prepared me for it. The sun was just beginning to cast its golden light across the savannah as I started my routine patrol. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of morning dew and acacia blossoms. I could hear the distant calls of zebras and the gentle rustling of grass as a light breeze swept across the plains. It was the kind of morning that reminded me why I fell in love with this job in the first place. I was walking along the riverbank, checking for signs of poaching activity, when I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. It was weak, barely audible above the rushing water, but unmistakable. The desperate cry of a lion cub in distress. I followed the sound, my heart already racing. And there, caught between two rocks in the swirling current, was a tiny lion cub. He couldn't have been more than 8 to 10 weeks old. His golden fur was matted and dark with river water, and his little paws were frantically clawing at the slippery stones, trying to find purchase. My training kicked in immediately. Protocol was clear: never interfere with natural processes. Wildlife must fend for itself. It's the first rule they teach every ranger, and for good reason. The moment you start interfering with nature's course, you disrupt the delicate balance that has existed for thousands of years. But as I watched that tiny creature struggling against the current, growing weaker with each passing second, I felt something inside me break. This wasn't nature taking its course. This was a baby, lost and terrified, fighting for his life in waters too powerful for his small body to overcome. His mother was nowhere in sight. If I walked away, if I followed protocol, he would die. And I would have to live with that choice for the rest of my life. I knew the risks. Oh, I knew them all too well. If this cub had family nearby, if his pride was searching for him, my intervention could put me in mortal danger. Lions are fiercely protective of their young, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill any perceived threat, even a human trying to help. But sometimes being human means choosing compassion over protocol. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. Without stopping to think about consequences or protocols, or the very real possibility that I was about to make the last decision of my life, I waded into that river. The water was shockingly cold, fed by mountain streams that never feel the warmth of the African sun. By the time I reached the cub, the current was up to my chest, threatening to sweep me downstream toward the deeper, more dangerous waters below. The little one was barely conscious when I finally got my hands on him. His tiny body was cold and limp, but I could feel his small heart beating rapidly against my palm. He was alive, barely but alive. "I've got you," I whispered, tucking him carefully inside my jacket. "You're safe now." But even as I said those words, I knew I was lying. Neither of us was safe. Not yet. The journey back to shore felt like an eternity. Each step was a battle against the current that seemed determined to claim us both. The riverbed was treacherous, covered in loose stones that shifted under my feet. More than once, I nearly lost my footing and went under. The only thing that kept me focused was the tiny life pressed against my chest and the trust I felt in those small paws that had wrapped themselves around my shirt. I was maybe 20 feet from the shore when I heard it. A sound that made every survival instinct I possessed scream in terror. The low, rumbling call of an adult lion. I froze in the chest-deep water, my heart hammering so hard I was sure the entire savannah could hear it. The cub stirred against my chest, responding to the familiar sound with a weak, mewing cry. And then I saw them. First one, emerging from the tall grass like a golden ghost. Then another, then a third. 3 adult lionesses, their amber eyes fixed directly on me. But it was the massive male that appeared last, his dark mane flowing in the morning breeze like a crown of shadow that made my blood turn to ice. This was it, This was how David the wildlife ranger was going to die. Torn apart in waist-deep water while trying to save a lion cub from drowning. The irony wasn't lost on me. The pride began moving closer to the water's edge, their movements deliberate and coordinated. I recognized the behavior immediately. They were positioning themselves to cut off any escape route I might have. These weren't random lions who had stumbled upon the scene. This was a hunting formation, and I was the prey. My mind raced through every piece of training I'd ever received about dangerous wildlife encounters. Make yourself appear large. Avoid direct eye contact. Back away slowly without turning your back on the predator. But every single piece of advice assumed you had room to maneuver, solid ground beneath your feet, and weren't holding the very thing these predators would kill to protect. The tranquilizer gun on my belt seemed pathetically inadequate against 4 adult lions. Even if I could draw it without dropping the cub, even if I had a clear shot, even if it worked perfectly, one dart against 4 of Africa's apex predators wasn't exactly favorable odds. The water felt colder now, and I realized I was shaking. Whether from the temperature or pure terror, I couldn't tell. The cub in my arms had grown quiet, sensing the tension in the air. Maybe he could smell his family. Maybe he knew his rescue was about to become his death sentence. And mine, the largest lioness, took another step toward the water. Her muscles rippled beneath her golden coat, and I could see the power coiled in her frame, like a spring waiting to be released. She was close enough now that I could see the individual scars on her muzzle, the intelligence burning in her amber eyes. This was the moment. I could feel it approaching like a thunderstorm on the horizon. In the next few seconds, either these lions would recognize that I was trying to help their young, or they would do what evolution had programmed them to do to any threat to their family. Time seemed to slow as I waited for my fate to be decided by creatures who had never learned to show mercy to humans. What happened next defied everything I thought I knew about wild animals. The massive male lion, the one whose very presence had turned my bones to water, began walking toward me. Not the stalking approach of a predator closing in for the kill, but something else entirely. Something I had never seen in 15 years of working with African wildlife. He was careful, deliberate. His enormous paws barely disturbed the water as he entered the river, and his eyes never left mine. But there was no aggression in that gaze, no threat, no promise of violence. There was something else there. Something that made no sense according to everything I'd been taught about lion behavior. There was recognition. I stood frozen in that river, water lapping at my chest, holding a lion cub against my heart, while his father approached me with the measured steps of respect. The word sounds impossible even now, but I can't think of any other way to describe what I witnessed. When the massive lion was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that his breath stirred the hair on my forehead, he did something that still brings tears to my eyes. He lowered his great head and gently pressed his forehead against mine. The gesture lasted maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like a lifetime. 10 seconds that changed everything I thought I understood about the connection between humans and the wild. In that moment, with our foreheads touching, I felt something pass between us. Not just acknowledgement, but genuine gratitude. This magnificent creature, this king of the African savannah, was thanking me for saving his child. The cub in my arms seemed to sense what was happening. He stirred against my chest and released a soft mewing sound, reaching one tiny paw toward his father. The great lion's response was immediate and heartbreaking. A deep, rumbling purr that vibrated through the water and into my bones. It was the sound of a father's love. The 3 lionesses had formed a semicircle around us now, but their posture had completely changed. Where moments before I had seen coiled predators ready to strike, now I saw witnesses, guardians watching over a sacred moment between species. The largest lioness, who I now realized was the cub's mother, approached from my left side. My rational mind screamed warnings, but something deeper told me to remain still, to trust in this impossible moment. She came close enough that I could see my reflection in her amber eyes, close enough that I could count the whiskers on her scarred muzzle. And then, with infinite gentleness, she began to groom me. Her rough tongue rasped across my cheek, the same nurturing behavior she would show to members of her own pride. She was accepting me, however temporarily, as family, as the human who had risked everything to save one of their own. Tears rolled down my face, mixing with the river water. I had spent my entire career studying these animals, respecting them from a distance, following the rules that kept both species safe. But here I was, standing in their world, being welcomed into their family, with a tenderness that challenged everything science understood about predator behavior. The cub chose that moment to reach up and place one tiny paw against my chin. His golden eyes, so much like his father's, stared into mine with complete trust. This little creature, who should have been terrified of humans, was treating me like pack, like family. The moment stretched on, suspended in time like a photograph. The great male with his forehead still pressed to mine. The mother lioness grooming my face with gentle strokes. The cub nestled safely against my chest, his small purr vibrating through both our bodies and the other lionesses. Standing in respectful silence around us, bearing witness to something that had never been documented in the wild. Something that shouldn't have been possible according to every scientific text ever written about African lions, a peace offering between predator and prey. A moment of perfect understanding across the vast divide that was supposed to separate our species. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Time seemed irrelevant, suspended in the face of something so beautiful and impossible that my mind struggled to process it. All I knew was that I never wanted it to end. I wanted to stay in that river forever, holding this precious life while being accepted by his extraordinary family. But eventually, the great male lifted his head. His amber eyes met mine one final time, and I swear I saw him nod. A gesture of acknowledgement between equals. Between two fathers who understood the depth of love that drives you to risk everything for your children. Slowly, carefully, the lions began to step back. The male was the first to move, returning to the riverbank with the same measured dignity he had shown approaching. The mother lioness gave me one final gentle nuzzle before following her mate. The other pride members maintained their protective circle, but I could feel the change in energy. The danger had passed. I was no longer prey. I was no longer a threat. I was the human who had saved their young. With shaking legs, I began the careful journey back to shore, still cradling the cub against my chest. The little one had grown stronger during our encounter, his tiny paws kneading against my jacket as he purred. Whether from warmth, security, or simply the joy of being reunited with his family, I couldn't tell. Maybe all three. As I reached the muddy bank, the pride parted to create a clear path for me. It was like walking through an honor guard of apex predators, each one acknowledging my passage with respectful distance. The great male positioned himself closest to the water, his massive frame blocking any potential retreat. But his posture spoke of protection rather than threat. I knelt at the water's edge and gently placed the cub on solid ground. The reunion was immediate and overwhelming. The mother lioness rushed to her offspring, nuzzling him thoroughly, checking every inch of his small body for injuries. Her purrs were so loud they seemed to shake the earth beneath us. The other lionesses joined in the examination, each taking turns to sniff and touch the rescued cub. But it was the great male's reaction that nearly broke me. This massive predator, this king of the savannah, approached his son with infinite tenderness and touched the cub's tiny head with his enormous muzzle, the gentleness in that gesture. It was the same tenderness I had seen in human fathers meeting their newborn children for the first time. I should have used that moment to retreat, to put distance between myself and the pride while they were focused on their reunion. Every survival instinct told me to back away slowly and count myself lucky to be alive, but I couldn't move. I was transfixed by the profound love unfolding before me, by the family bonds that transcended species and challenged everything I thought I knew about wild animals. That's when I remembered my camera, my hands were shaking as I slowly reached for the waterproof action camera clipped to my belt. It had been recording automatically throughout the entire encounter, a habit I'd developed over years of wildlife documentation. If the footage had survived the river crossing, if the housing had held, I had proof of the impossible. Later, back at the research station, Dr. Sarah Mitchell examined the cub I had rescued. Her findings were sobering. The little one had been severely dehydrated and hypothermic. Without intervention, he would have died within hours. "You saved his life," she told me, as we watched the healthy cub playing with his siblings through binoculars. There's no question about that, but when I showed her the footage, when she saw the behavior the pride had exhibited, her scientific composure cracked completely. "This challenges everything we understand about lions' social behavior," she whispered, rewinding the section where the great male had pressed his forehead to mine. The grooming behavior from the female, the protective positioning of the pride, the obvious recognition and gratitude. She paused the video on a frame that would later become famous worldwide. The moment when all 4 adult lions had their heads bowed in what could only be described as reverence. "David," she said, her voice filled with awe, "you didn't just save a cub. You participated in something that science has never documented. A formal acknowledgement between species. A moment of genuine interspecies communication and gratitude." Over the following weeks, the footage was analyzed by animal behaviorists from around the world. Frame by frame, they studied every gesture, every expression, every subtle movement. The consensus was unanimous and shocking. The lions had demonstrated cognitive recognition, emotional intelligence, and social behaviors that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal consciousness. They had shown gratitude. They had honored a debt. They had welcomed a member of another species into their family structure, however briefly. Dr. Mitchell's research paper, published months later, would be titled "Beyond Instinct: Evidence of Complex Emotional Intelligence in African Lions." It would revolutionize the field of animal behavioral studies and earn her international recognition. But for me, the scientific validation mattered less than the truth I had experienced firsthand. In that muddy river, surrounded by wild predators who should have seen me as a threat, I had witnessed something that transcended species barriers. I had seen the universal language of love and gratitude spoken by creatures we were only beginning to understand. 3 years have passed since that morning by the river, and my life has never been the same. The cub I rescued, the rangers have started calling him Simba, has grown into a magnificent young adult. He still lives with his pride in the same territory, and whenever I patrol that area, something extraordinary happens. He recognizes me, not just the casual awareness that wild animals show toward familiar humans, but genuine recognition. When he sees my vehicle approaching, he often approaches without fear, sometimes even resting in the shade it provides. His mother, the lioness who groomed me that day, acknowledges me with gentle chuffs whenever our paths cross. The local Maasai guides have given me a name: Simba's brother. The man who was adopted, however briefly, into a lion pride. My story has been featured in documentaries around the world. Tourism operators offer David Thompson tours, hoping to recreate the magic of my encounter, though nothing has ever come close to that impossible moment of connection. The footage has been viewed millions of times online, translated into dozens of languages, and shared by people who see in it something their hearts desperately needed to believe: that animals can feel gratitude, that love transcends species, that compassion is truly a universal language. Dr. Mitchell established the Thompson Mara Research Foundation to study the cognitive and emotional capabilities demonstrated by lion prides. Her work has opened new frontiers in animal behavioral science, challenging us to reconsider the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. But beyond the scientific papers and documentary features and viral videos, the most important change has been in me. That day in the river taught me something that no textbook or training manual ever could. It showed me that compassion isn't a weakness, it's the strongest force in the natural world. When we choose to help others, regardless of species or circumstance, we create ripples of positive energy that return to us in ways we never expect. I didn't just save a lion cub that morning. I saved something in myself, my faith in the fundamental goodness that connects all living things. The pride still roams the same territory, and I still patrol the same riverbank. Sometimes, when the morning light hits the water just right, and the savannah is quiet except for the distant calls of zebras, I remember that moment when time stopped. When a great lion pressed his forehead to mine and spoke without words, the gratitude that bridges all species, and I'm reminded that love has no language barriers, no species limitations, no boundaries that cannot be crossed by a heart willing to risk everything for another soul in need. That's the message I carry with me now, the truth I share whenever I tell this story. In a world that often feels divided by differences, the animals of the Maasai Mara taught me the most human lesson of all. We are all connected. We all feel pain, joy, fear, and love. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to step into the current and risk everything for another life,